Imagine you're 11 years old. It's 1998 and you're with your mom at the mall when you see it. The latest Goosebumps, Monster Blood 4. Yes, you think, finally! Goosebumps by then had taken a hold of you, and you immediately flip the book over to check out the summary. Also because you're more than a little curious to see what the next book will be called. But you see something odd. Instead of a title or a book number, the only thing you see is an advertisement for something called Goosebumps Series 2000. What the hell, you think? This can't be right. This is book 62. They can't just end it here.
Okay! That is it! This is the final straw! This is a nightmare!
That was a true story that happened to yours truly in the late 90s. But regardless, I really did flip out when it dawned on me that the venerable Goosebumps, the OG series, was at an end. To me, it was unexpected. This was the late 90s. There was no social media, the internet was still young at that point, so unless you weren't 11 and knew where to get your industry news from, you were a bit out of luck. But luckily, the only thing that really changed was the series title, as everything else pretty much remained the same. R.L. Stine was still the author, and he was still writing those crazy endings.
Every story ever told can be broken down into 3 distinct parts. The beginning, the middle, and the twist.
Once I read the first book in the new series, Cry of the Cat, my fears were quickly laid to rest. This was just simply Goosebumps for a new millennium. First, I want to address the elephant in the room. The series is called Goosebumps Series 2000 because at the time, America kind of had a fascination with Y2K. The Y2K bug was supposed to be this glitch when the computers lost their shit because of the jump from 1999 to 2000, shutting everything down because of how automated we had become, resulting in the end of days. Now, obviously that never happened, but people made bank on it by placing 2000 after literally everything. WrestleMania 16? Nah, it has to be WrestleMania 2000. Wanna bring back Double Dare on Nickelodeon? Yeah, I know, right? But what are we gonna call it? I know, Double Dare. Wait for it, 2000. Oh, you just had a baby? What'd you name him? John? Nah, it has to be John 2000. You get my point. We were nuts back then, what can I say? Well, we still are, but that's beside the point. Goosebumps Series 2000 was a thing, and Cry of the Cat is the first book in the series. So let's check it out. It follows a girl named Allison and her misadventures with a cat named Rip. Now, normally I would dismiss the cat's name as insignificant, but being a lifelong Goosebumps reader, I feel I can safely surmise that Rip is a play on R.I.P., as in rest in peace. Now, how did I make that connection? I'm glad you asked. Here to explain is my new friend, the Condescending Man. Thanks, Laughing Man. You see, it is in fact as you said. RIP is a play on R.I.P., specifically a pun, as the acronym is typically pronounced RIP, as in to rip you apart. Thanks, Condescending Man. So Rip the cat is killed by Allison when she runs over him on her bike. She takes Rip to the appropriately spooky-looking house from which he came. There, she meets a girl named Crystal who says she shouldn't have messed with the cat. Right after he squirms free and darts around the side of the house. The rest of the book is actually pretty funny, in a way that I'm sure had to be intentional. R.L. Stine plays off the cats have 9 lives cliché wonderfully, and I kept laughing every time Allison accidentally kills Rip over and over again. While rehearsing for a school play, Rip jumps on her face, to which she tosses the cat away, directly onto a kid carrying a throne. So the throne falls and crushes poor Rip.
You're as cold as ice. You're willing to sacrifice our love.
Another incident late at night finds Rip on Allison's face again. Rip, you've got to stop doing that, buddy. It never ends well. Like at the play, she grabs Rip and chucks him straight out of the window. Allison's bedroom is on the 2nd story of her parents' house, by the way. Mortified, she goes to the window to look at Rip, who's laying on his back with his head twisted, clearly a broken neck. Now, I don't know why I find this so funny. I guess I have a twisted sense of humor. Alright, I'll stop. The book ends rather quietly, discounting the fact that Rip has turned Crystal's mother into a half-human, half-cat hybrid, and is trying to do the same to Allison, but once Rip is laid to rest, everyone lives happily ever after. To sum up this book, I'm reminded of an old Norm Macdonald joke about the time his cat got a heart attack. After calling 911 and realizing that there are such things as hospitals for animals, he takes the cat to the vet's office where he's rushed into the back someplace. Before long, Norm is approached by a doctor, but you know, like not a real doctor, who says Norm can go to the back to visit his cat for about 20 minutes or so. So Norm goes to the back, and after seeing his cat all drugged up and everything, he realizes, hey, I've got a life to go back to. In other words, feel free to skip this one. Book number 2 is called Bride of the Living Dummy, but we're actually going to skip this one. You'll see why in a future video. The third book in this series is called Creature Teacher, and is another funny story in that it requires a huge suspension of disbelief on the part of the reader and the adult characters in the story. The story focuses on a jokester named Paul who gets sent to a boarding school. Wait, did I mention this book has a prologue? Yes, a chapter book barely over 100 pages has a prologue, but it's super creepy, so much so that it has literally stuck with me for the preceding 20 years since I read it. I always thought Stephen King wrote it, this short story about a kid lying in bed at night, thinking about a joke he told his parents that made him laugh that day, unaware of the creature with long tendrils reaching up from underneath his bed, reaching for him. It's really good. Has nothing to do with the next 100 pages of the book, but I remember it more than the actual story, so there's that. Anyway, so Paul gets sent to an elite boarding school named the Caring Academy, cause they care. They care so much about Paul, an underachieving class clown whose overachieving parents want to instill in their son a sense of academic pride. One problem with that though. One of his teachers is a monster! A monster named Mrs. Marr with 3 A's. This is just so much more awkward because I'm recording at like 1:30 in the morning and my girlfriend's asleep. And I got neighbors upstairs. But she gets away with it because the other kids in class are in perpetual fear of Mrs. Marg, who is pretty open about her being a monster. She has this thing called a food chain, a ranking system of the kids in class based on how well they're doing. Whoever is unfortunate enough to be ranked last is in severe danger of being eaten by Mrs. Marg. This instills in the kids a keen interest in being model students, from creating random extra credit projects to show off, to finding talents to use in the upcoming talent show in order to impress Mrs. Marg. This all begs the question, how in the hell is Mrs. Marg getting away with all this? It's assumed that she's the only one of her kind at the school, so why hasn't she been caught? Pretty simply, actually. Condescending man? Yes, you see, in spite of her enlarged feet and head and black claws, the other teachers just assume that the kids are making stuff up, because Mrs. Marg is a harsh teacher and looks a little funny. And besides, it's her glands that are the cause of her deformities, like the claws. So don't you dare body shame her, you little bastards. My absolute favorite part of the book is when Paul takes up the construction of a model molecule, damn, and presents it to Mrs. Marg. By this time, Paul has fallen precipitously down the food chain, so much that he is on the floor. God damn! The model is housed in a box, and when he opens it, bless him, but the sticks and balls have been rearranged to read 2 words. You ugly. You ugly. Now put yourself in Paul's shoes for a moment. You are in massive danger of being eaten by your teacher, who happens to be a legit monster. She licks your arm, tells you to fatten up, that you're likely to be her next meal. Meanwhile, you can't help but stepping on her massive feet, talking shit about her to a kid named Marv who you didn't know was her son, and you messed up your act for the talent show in front of the whole class. You're screwed. But a friend of yours has an idea. Make a model of a really complicated molecule. That'll surely impress Mrs. Marg, put you back in her good graces. You spend all of your free time on it, making sure it's just right, feeling super confident when you go up to the teacher's desk after class with your project. You open the box up, nerves causing your hands to shake, and you both look down at not a molecule, but you ugly. In a stumbling fit of rage, the monster you just pissed off manages to say,
Is it even good? Come on!
Let's have a moment of silence for Paul, shall we? Don't worry, it all works out for him. So that's about all I have to say for this book. It kept me entertained and just serves to prove that in spite of the change in series title, it's still the same old Goosebumps, where the adults are severely lacking in common sense. Do you have anything to add, condescending man? Just this. Creature Teacher is a perfect metaphor for the overbearing teacher every student has faced. This is exemplified in the food chain employed by Mrs. Marg, ensuring that she gets peak performance from her students so as they are not eaten, in spite of the emotional turmoil the students are forced to endure. Is this not the same as the competitive nature of schools in general? Striving to be the best? Taking on extracurriculars? Sitting at the front of class? Still in the hopes of positioning yourself for this or that scholarship or grant. Surely failure to do so will result in your being eaten, not by any physical monster, but by the system itself. Wait.